Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, David.
That laugh must mean that I gave you the finger.
I thought I saw a bird.
No, how many bird in the bush? What is it?
Yeah, a bird in the hand.
Anyway, are you a regular listener? Why not? Subscribe to the Practical Guitarist using your chosen podcast app. Take the time to put in a review with the service where you found our podcast like iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Get involved. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/Practical Guitarist. You can also find us at Twitter as @PractGuitarist. If you're interested in supporting the show, we have launched a Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. And if you'd like to donate money to the show, there's always Patreon. Our Patreon is available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. If you need to reach out to us directly, you can do so at questions@practicalguitarist.com. This is a question answer episode, actually, so we're gonna we're gonna answer some questions from the podcast group, not from Questions app, but
Yes,
it is what it is.
Exactly. So one of the questions that we got in the group was regarding solid state tube amps and the overdrive, the effect of overdrive and distortion.
Okay. So, first question, I guess, is how do solid state amps and tube amps react to pedals? Right?
I was surprised at a couple of the in-group answers, honestly.
I didn't read through all of them, to be honest. I didn't have time yet. I've been doing a lot of video work, so yeah. But anyway, so in the answers you want to bring up to point out first, and then...
Okay, so we had John Osborne started this whole thing.
Right.
And he had asked you about...
the katana, right?
The katana, and what it was about the katana that made it take pedals well. And then there was a question about solid state and tube and so on and so forth. So I started a new thread to make it easier to find. And I said, it looks like John Osborne has initiated a good question. We've all heard distortion for this, drives for that argument. What about solid state versus tubes? Drop the questions here. So Jay Wells said, I've got both solid state tube combo. Both are good for getting me the sound I want in the moment. And that is what matters, is getting your tone you want. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And he says, use your tools. Mike Haug, Haug, Haug. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, because I probably am. Although I may usually lean one way versus the other, there are three conflicts. I don't take sides on vintage versus modern, analog versus digital, tube versus solid state. I don't think that's what we were really trying to go for.
No,
here,
we're not trying to pick sides. I think Jim and I are both of the persuasion that depending on what you're doing, I would be stupid if I didn't bring it up that, hey, solid state amps have their place, specifically in certain genres of music. I mean, they're all over... And I know people won't want to admit this, but they're all over metal records. They're all over jazz records too. The JC120 is the amp right now for jazz and has been for 20 years. So
I'll say something about the JC120 usage in the jazz genre. You're not going to find a whole lot of drive pedals in front of it. You're certainly not going to find a lot of. So,
but it'll do it. It will.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going. John Osborne asked Mike what solid states they like. And Mike responded the ID and ID core. I was kind of surprised by that, but
yeah,
maybe he does a lot of metal. Because they are big. They're big in the metal scene.
I know some guys who like the ID core stuff. I don't think the ID core stuff touches what Boss is doing right now, but...
No, the katana, not really. But, I mean, again, they have
his own, and I'm sure they do a very specific thing very well. So,
the Vox Valvetronic stuff has been great for years. I used the Valvetronics for a while. As a matter of fact, I had their pedal
Yeah,
and I would push the clean front end of an amp with that. Wasn't terrible.
Yeah,
Wasn't true.
So it depends on which ones we're talking about. If we're talking about the little silver fronted guys with the silver metal grill thing that they did for a while, the original Valvetronics line, which was a competitor for like the Line 6 Flex Tone stuff, was pretty good. It wasn't great. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good.
Yep.
So
that's the one I had. And he said additionally as a Crate GX 130C. He's had for about 25 years. I remember the Crates, again, you talk about how there's a lot of solid state on metal albums. I can say that the Crates had a really good rep in the late 80s and early 90s. Actually, probably around the mid 80s. They started to come into their own. And they were very popular. A lot of people were using them.
So we've talked to Jason Fuzzmonger, and he says that a lot of those amps, particularly Crates in general, if you replace the speaker, they sound much, much better. So
I think that's where one of the things that we've got to remember when it comes to solid state amps in the budget category is that, let's face it, that's where you save a lot of money. You can save money. You can save money on construction, and you can save money on the speaker. And it's a awful thing actually when you take a decent amp and put it in front of into a crappy speaker. And let me show you this. I'm going to show you the back of the. So I did my video right where I talked about the Guitar World thing. I got to take pictures this week and post it. But look at what's on the back.
The Marshall valve state, right? Is
that laughable or what?
Yeah, and it says, it cracks me up.
But what's funny is what Marshall was saying about the valve state. They said the clean crunch and distortion. Valve state comes in a 40, 80 level. You'll get all the Marshall extras. And here's what I love about it. Buffered effects loop, direct outs, headphone jacks, blah, blah, blah. They actually wrote blah, blah, blah in the And the one thing no other amp can give you, that Marshall sound. If your Marshall sounded like a guitar amp that was stuck underwater, fighting for its life to get its last breath of air, that was that Marshall sound that you wanted.
So let me because you brought it up, right? The valve states. Yep. So it's actually kind of interesting that we're talking about this approach to amplifiers as we talk about a tube solid state different kind of discussion, because obviously hybrids do exist. There have been good ones and there have been some awful ones. Yes. And look, I'm not saying awful in the sense that you can't use this for your style of music. I'm sure some of our listeners may even own valve state amps. But I will say this. The guy who was in charge of Marshall at one point, he did an interview recently, and actually it was over on Amps and Axes, and I forget his name. But you can go back. It's in one of the back episodes. And he talks about this, and he basically says they had a couple of engineers in a room, and they were trying to figure out how they could actually sell their solid state line because nobody was buying them. So one of the guys said, well, shit, we'll just put a tube in it. Like, the tube won't do anything, but we'll put it in there, and everybody will be convinced it's great. And they did. And that's how the Valve State series started. The tubes were basically, and you can, I can remember when those amps were really popular back in the late 90s, and people were like, oh, I changed the tube in mine, and nothing happened. And it's like, because it's not doing anything anyway. Yeah, you could probably play the fucking thing out.
That would be interesting, is to find somebody that owns a valve state and yank the tubes and see if anything happens.
Yeah. So,
I do remember they had no real function. Although they may pass electricity, I don't think they did anything.
Yeah, it was basically a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay, like, I guess, to an extent. But, because the amps were hugely expensive, even having that gimmick in them, they were not expensive amps.
If you do like them, they're relatively cheap on the used market.
Yeah, I just, for my money, if I was going to go that route, I'd probably just buy a Marshall MG, which is solid state, and be done with it. Actually, I think Marshall has always had pretty decent solid state offerings, better than some of their competitors, and I think that's because they committed early on to using quality speakers.
What do you think of the Fender Champion?
Which the Champion 100.
Yeah.
So I played one actually recently.
I was looking at one that's
so when Fender did back, I think it was in the early 2000s. They did like the Deluxe 90 DSP and a couple of other. They had a twin, I think, solid state twin, and they did a couple of them, and they were actually so. If you only wanted that Fender clean sound, you could get it from those guys. It wasn't it wasn't the same as having a $1,000 deluxe reverb on the floor, but it was, it was sensible. You could get away with it, and I knew people who were using it as pedal platforms. Hell, I jammed with a guy who was a much better player than me at the time, who had a Deluxe 90 DSP with a so I don't even think he had a processor. I think he was using the inbuilt distortion. And he was just killing it doing metal stuff. His tone was actually not bad either. So, I mean, everything has its application and its purpose. I think the one thing that people kind of associate with solid state amps is that they're not as loud, and there are logical reasons for that. Number one, when you push a tube, it doesn't just end saturation at some point. It continues to try and create the sound even though you've already saturated it. Where solid state, once you're clipped, that's it. So I think that's part of the reason. Which is why you find high-end solid state amps typically are way, way higher in output. And so like a Champion 100 is, I would say, roughly equivalent to maybe a 35 watt or 40 watt tube amp. Yeah. I mean, they're just not that loud. Now that being said, do you need more than 30 watts tube? Not really.
Not really. I mean, the fact is, I'm looking at it only because it looks like one of the most decent amps, in that solid state category. Where for a 2x12, it would be relatively light.
I'm looking to see what they're priced at. Yeah, $300. That's not bad. That's kind of expensive, actually, for what it is. I mean, so the kings of solid state amplification, as far as I'm concerned right now, if you want a kind of a do-it-all thing, PV, they're still making their Bandits and stuff like that, and they're actually not bad amps. And you can get them dirt cheap if you buy like a Bandit or something for next to nothing, and they sound really good. In fact, Johan Segborn, the guy that does all the Plexi videos on YouTube, he does a video where he takes I think it's a PV Bandit, and then makes it sound like a Plexi. And anything that guy touches sounds like a Plexi. So I don't know if it's the amp or him, but it actually it was a pretty good demonstration. And people were joking in the comments like, now everybody's going to run out and buy Bandits, Yeah,
but are you talking about the Bandit? I mean, there's a lot of different Bandits. There's Trans-Tube Bandit.
Yeah, Trans-Tube. The Trans-Tube one.
The Trans-Tube. Those things go for $400 new.
New, but used, you can get them for next to nothing. You can get them for $150. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And they did a hybrid one too, I think. I don't know if it was a Bandit or something else, but they did a hybrid Trans-Tube. No, Trans-Tubes are solid state.
Oh, they don't have a tube in them?
No.
They don't even have like a fake tube?
Nope. Anytime it says like something hyphen tube, or it's like a new tube word, usually that means it's solid state, because they're wanting to evoke this emotion of, oh, this might have tubes in it, to get you to play it. And then when you look in the back and you realize there's no tubes in it, you're like, oh, I feel like I got suckered.
Yep.
And that's the other thing. These hybrid amps, a lot of times you can't even get to the tubes in them. They're like on the board. You have to take the chassis apart to get to the tube.
Because it's just a light. And they're not lying. They're not lying that the tube is in there. Yeah. It's just that there's nothing that it does. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, so when you look at the way a tube distorts, and you look at the way a transistor distorts, right? A transistor, although we're talking about the analog end of a transistor, of an analog, obviously a tube, the analog output.
Yeah, it's essentially a square wave.
Right. A transistor has a much different looking wave than the output of a tube.
Right, because the output of a tube is it's continuously variable. That's the way I would think about it. So if you think about a transmission on your car, a continuously variable transmission changes its shift points as needed, right? Whereas a manual, or not manual, but a regular automatic transmission will have specific shift points that are designed into it. And that's essentially the same thing as what goes on here, except at an audio level. So when you push your amp hard, is it going to distort in a way that is pleasing, i.e. like a CVT transmission, or is it going to distort in a way that is rougher, which would be like the regular automatic transmission? So your regular automatic transmission is more like what you would get from a solid state amp. Your CVT is what you get from tubes.
Yep.
But that's not to say you can't convincingly create a waveform using solid state components that mimics like what you would get out of a tube. I mean, there's a lot of companies that do it really freaking well. Tech 21 comes to mind.
Yep.
Who else? PV, obviously we were discussing them. The Roland stuff, I don't think it's meant necessarily to sound like a tube amp, but they do in a lot of ways. The Blues Cube series of amps that Roland rolled out a year or two ago, those are pretty good. The Waza. See, I don't know if the Waza is a solid state amp or if it's a digital amp, because there's really three classes of amps. There's solid state, there's digital, and then there's tube. And actually, digital is kind of a hybrid of digital technology and solid state amplification. Right. So it gets really like convoluted, and I know other podcasts have touched on that before too. So I'll try not to go over that too much. But I mean, basically, you've got three types of amplification nowadays. The Katana is not a solid state amp. People will tell you up and down, "Oh my God, it's got a solid state front end on it." No, it does not. It is a digital modeling amp, preamp. It is a GT100 that has been slightly modified and put into an amp. That is what it is. And yes, they want to evoke those feelings. I'm sure that there's some sort of FET front input stage. That's how they're able to get the dynamic feel down and better than the GT series. The original, the GT100 series, not the GT series. Apparently, Siri is having a spasm over here. Let me shut off my phone. So, yes, there are.
Power off your iPhone. Press and hold the power button.
Do you hear this bitch?
That appears on the screen.
Seriously,
huh?
Shut up. I'm power off. All right. Enough of you. Siri is she's just trying to irritate me now. Like, I don't know why she won't let me call her foul language. That's the part I'm trying to figure out. But anyway.
Yeah, she should take that better. She
just like intercedes in the middle of the most inopportune times, and I hate her. Anyway. So, the Katana is using a similar approach, I think, to what Strymon does in some of their drive pedals, where they have an FET input stage that gives them the ability to kind of intercept and intercede with a more tube-like feel, and then they push that on into the DSP processing section, which has been tweaked to handle it, and then that allows you to get a more dynamic feel than what you're usually accustomed to. So in a way, it's a hybrid technology. Now, I would not be surprised at all to find out Boss is doing this. They certainly have experience with full scale solid state amplification. JC120 is a good example. They've rolled out, I think, they have JC90 and a JC45 or something now. They have some smaller ones, and then they also have the Blues Cube series. I don't know if they're making any of the other cubes, but that's Boss Roland.
Yeah,
it's the same.
Yeah, same company.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, the gold standard, like there are all kinds of older solid state amps that people really like customs and stuff like that. I'm not real big and I don't know a lot about all of those amps. Part of the reason why I steered away from solid state over the years was simply this. Solid state amps are a lot harder to get repaired. Yeah. And tube amps, you can find a dozen techs who can figure out what's wrong with your amp and fix it. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Now, in the future, is that going to stay that way? Probably not. I mean, I can imagine that tube technology as it wanes, and I'm not talking about in our decade, but maybe in 50 years or 100 years when people just have kind of like migrated away from tubes. we're on the verge of it right now. We're living in the time frame where people are switching to digital equipment over tube equipment, and it's not going to go back the other way. It just won't, unless we have some sort of EMP event or something, and in which case we're all screwed anyway. Nobody's going to be worried about playing guitars. I don't know, Jim. I do think that there are definitely great solid state amps out there. The old Rantel Century series comes to mind.
Yeah.
Like I said, the JC120 always comes up in these conversations, and it's because it's good enough that Roland has not modified that design in the 20-something years, 30 years they've been offering that amp. They literally are making it the same way. They have not revised the boards, which is
you don't hear about them rolling out new versions of it. There are certain mainstay amplifiers that just don't change much. That's one of them. I mean, obviously, most of the JCM series from Marshall, the Triple Rec series from Mesa. You've got the Fender Blues Junior. I mean, you really haven't seen much except for the fat switch that's been added to it. I mean, I just wish they'd add, if they're going to add that fat switch, why not a foot pedal to let me go?
I thought the fat switch always existed on the Blues Junior.
I thought that was an add-on.
I think it's been there for a long time, Jim.
I don't know as it's been there that too long, because I remember having one without it.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Fair enough. So I don't know. In terms of tube versus solid state amplification, there's a lot more money being pushed at making tube amplification better and digital hybrid stuff better. But I don't think there's a lot of money getting pushed into solid state amplification anymore, which is interesting, because solid state amplification is really the I'm trying to think of the right way to word it. It's really the antithesis of tubes, because you're using analog parts, right, to produce the same sounds as you would get from a tube. And if you do it well enough, you can have really good results. I think the allure there is dead, because people want tube amps. And so digital gets them closer. Or they feel like it gets them closer anyway. I'll tell you that there's some solid state stuff that I played that is certainly a lot closer to tubes than some of the digital stuff, because of the feel. And that's what, for me, that's a major component of this, is that you don't have the latency in solid state that you do in digital stuff. And some of the older digital stuff, you could feel the latency. Like, it just felt like you were really having to push and rake those notes to get them to come out right. And that really has to do with the fact that, line 6, for example, probably was dealing with 20 milliseconds worth of latency when the Axis 212 came out. Now, that's a long time ago. We've obviously overcome a lot of those hurdles. I can't feel much latency in my Helix. There is definitely some latency there, but it's not something I feel like I have to overcome.
Right. I mean, where in latency do you start feel like you can feel it? By the way, the fat switch was 1992.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago.
They do now, I guess, have a foot switch, which I don't know when they introduced that, but
I think the foot switch has been a thing as long as I've been playing too. So,
it's been obviously been a long time since I had a Blues Junior.
yeah, a really long time, Jim. Don't date yourself any further.
I was in my 30s when I got it.
So
that's even worse.
As we dial back in time,
yes,
and we look at solid state versus tube amps, right? Let's see what is the first good solid state amp you can remember? Because I know you're obviously advanced in years already.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just
to
a
be honest,
few.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think Crate was putting out, like I said, Crate amps were one of the early ones. I can't remember if early Carvins were solid state. I know that here's the thing that solid state really kicked off with was people were using like the Rockman and then pushing power amps with a Rockman. And that was really a thing. So these guys would haul out, these big things that made it look like they were playing through all these huge amps. and they were actually playing through this little cigar box size thing.
Yeah, that was like in their pocket, you know.
Yeah, and it was actually it was back in the it was back sitting on top of something like maybe their wireless unit or whatever on their rack.
Yeah, maybe taped down.
Taped down or Velcroed down, and then they would run that into a power amp, and that would be like a Crown power amp or a QSC, something like that. And that's really one of the first things, and because that didn't require a whole lot of pedals.
Well, that would have been like what, the mid '70s?
Yeah, and it was because let's see, that would have been like 78. So I know the Rockman came out relatively early. So that was a big thing.
Well, I'm going to go back further, and so if you go back into the '60s, you will find dudes, especially guitar players. 'Cause back then, they didn't give a shit. It was what sounds good to me, or what can I get an endorsement for because I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, well, there was that side too. Yeah.
Well, the Doors, right? Robbie Krieger.
Right.
In the studio, he's
yeah.
using deluxes and twins, but on stage he's using I don't even remember what the brand is, but it was basically whatever the equivalent of Sony was. Like back in the day, he had Sony amps on stage pretty much, and it was like solid state, and the whole band used them. And that was not uncommon for like the whole band to get an endorsement from a particular company. Those are the Beatles. They used Vox, you know, and then they had the Vox Super Beetle, which was a solid state amp. And you know, so it's not just like it didn't just happen because Def Leppard was using the Rockmans in the studio. Like this has been a thing for a really long time. And I know I've talked to people who are like younger guitar players like myself. We thought like, oh well, no, solid state amplification came later in like late '70s, and I'm like, no, man, it's been around almost as long as tube amplification has. So it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Well, I think that also you've got to look at so that comes to the question really in the forum, because we talked about the jazz guys. The jazz guys can use a JC120 because why?
They only need clean, and they want that fast
sound.
attack, and it's that fast attack too, and that's the thing.
Yes, it's instantaneous.
That's the same thing with metal players. They want a fast attack, which is why they'll have. And they won't tell you this, but they might be using a solid state amp in the studio, like as one of the 3 amps that's on a track, because they want that fast attack and that immediacy. And
line six amps. There were guys using those line 6 flex tones and the line 6. What was it? Axis? Was it
the Axis 212 was the original, and then they had the Veta.
Right?
They had the Veta later.
Yeah, the Veta, and those things were using the heads in the studio. On the track because of what you're talking about right there.
Yeah. So when you think about studio recording and sound synthesis, because that's really what we're talking about here. When you got a synthesizer, right? You got attack controls, you've got sustain controls and decay controls, so you can control through the three areas of individual notes. And that's kind of what some of these guys are doing in their approach. Is they got an attack control, and they mix in, you know, a solid state amp, and then they have a sustain control, which is their tube amp, and then their decay controls, which is like really a delay for them, or a reverb that they use to kind of control the tail end of the note, or a gate. Actually, you can think about the gate the same way. And when you really evaluate things and sit down and kind of think about it that way, it makes a hell of a lot more sense as to why some of these bands are pushing like 4 tracks of guitar. It's because they don't really need 4 tracks of guitar. They need sound synthesis. Like they want to make sure that they're getting the right, you know, attack and sustain. So they have their uses. I mean, it's not as though solid state amplification is the ugly, you know, stepchild of guitar amps. And as far one of the questions that came up in the group, and I want to talk about this one now. They were talking about what's the difference in front end with pedals. And a lot of people think you can't put overdrive pedals in front of
solid state
amp. And really, that comes back to the core. Why do you think overdrive pedals existed? That's what they were designed for originally. Not we, but some legends out there like Stevie Ray Vaughan were the guys that decided that if you turn the gain down on a tube screamer, it makes a pretty good boost. Like that's pretty much how that whole thing came about. if you look at solid state amplification, same way, what happens when we're talking about that step, the transmission thing a minute ago, what happens when you push pedals and you boost a solid state amp, you get unpleasant distortion.
Right.
So really you have to go back the other way with an overdrive pedal and say, I'm going to use this to simulate my gain and not worry about pushing it past unity. Or if you do push it past unity, it's very minimal. And most solid state amps do have enough headroom that you can get away with, pushing past minimal.
Would that be max headroom?
No, I don't think I would consider it max headroom, but it would be increased headroom.
That was a TV show.
I know what it was. I'm just teasing you.
One of the other things that was a lot of folks were doing was using, and I think that's probably where they came up with the whole tube preamp and solid state post amp. So a lot of people were using, and this was especially popular. Now
you're going to get me going, Jim. I'm warning you.
It's got the Marshall JMPs in front of a solid state. They would push another amp with that.
All right. So
they had to have that tube preamp with the.
We're seeing a marked change in the last 20 years. Well, really, now we're 30 years of amplification where people are like more okay with having front end distortion. So preamp distortion, which is, what we think of angry nest of bees in a bottle, that kind of thing. That they're doing that up front and then just making it louder, and they don't want any coloration. I'm not that guy. Okay. And it sounds funny because I play Maces, but I'm not that guy. What I want to do is I want to push my power tubes because the power tubes are what give you all that warmth and all the good dynamics and compression that you expect.
But that comes back to something that I talked about earlier. If your feeling is that when you're listening to your favorite guitar player, right? What are you listening to it through? Are you listening through a solid state or a tube amp?
Does it matter if it's neutral?
Exactly.
That's the question you got to ask yourself, Jim. Because your personal listening device makes no difference. It's neutral. It's designed to be neutral. Yeah, we could debate that, but obviously, if you buy your cheap ass boombox over at Walmart, it's not gonna be neutral.
All right, and if you're using your Beats headphones, because
that's
Beats
fucking not neutral. Let's hype some bass. Let's hype some bass.
Boom. Drop the bass.
No.
All right, so there is a lack of neutrality. Let's face it. All right, so most people aren't listening in a quiet environment to their music. They're listening, whether it's because they got the headphones on, whether at the office, or I should say earbuds in at the office, because when nobody wears headphones anymore except you and I, who are sitting here talking to each other, right? Or you're in a car, you're driving down the road, you got road noise, you've got external car noise. You've got all the things that go on, plus the fact that the car, unless you've got a decent JBL system or something like that in there, a Bose system in there, and let's not get into the fact that Bose colors the sound too. Yeah. All right.
Well, it's unavoidable. You're going to color the sound some. These audiophiles out there spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on power cables, to try and get the most out of their system, are obviously chasing the dragon,
and then they've got their iPhone hooked in an iDock.
Yeah, yes. I heard a story recently about a guy that had he spent like $10,000 on a power cable for his system, and he had like $100,000 speakers and stuff, and it was like, can you even tell a difference between this and your system when it was only a $5,000 system? Like,
yeah, exactly. The diminishing returns. I want you to get back to what you were talking about, but all I'm saying is, because of that coloration of the sound, what you were saying is you want to hear that tube amp pushing blah, blah, blah. Some people, it's just fine hearing the distortion that was created by that they hear in the record, or what they were hearing through their their sound system, whatever that sound system as we went through was or is. Then they're going to be fine with that just being louder. It's this loud, now it's louder.
No, absolutely. And there's a whole class of amplifiers that exist that do that. I mean, that's what Class D is. Right. And when you're talking about a lot of these newer designs where they've got, a tube in the front end, or maybe a digital preamp, and then the power amp is a Class D amp. And we talked about even Thomas Plug. I mean, his design is basically a Class D power amp.
Right.
And that's essentially doing that. It's taking a preamp that sounds a certain way and then just amplifying it, making it louder. And that's okay to an extent. That's not the sound that I'm after. That's all I'm saying. And I think
I understand that.
I think that when they did do these hybrid amps originally, I think they approached them wrong. I think what they should have been doing was saying, all right, we're going to put power tubes in here, and maybe a 12AX7 is a phase inverter, and then the preamp can be solid state, it can be whatever you want. Because it's going to warm it up and nobody cares.
Right. What I'm saying is that there is a place. Let's say you've got a pedal that's for example, your Wampler pedal is an amp in a box, right?
It's supposed to be, yeah.
Supposed to be. So in other words, I can take the output of that, stick it into the instrument in of any power amp or the board, and I don't need an amp other than that. I just turn it up.
Yeah, so I haven't had great success with that idea. No, with that idea in general, because I've done it before. I mean, I've used keyboard amps and everything else to try and, because they're basically flat. They're supposed to be, or PAs, and unless you got for me, like, I have to have a speaker emulator. Even if I'm going to use an amp in the box, it's got to go into a speaker emulator first, because otherwise you're just going to be amplifying it through a PA head and then maybe into a guitar cab. But the PA head's not designed to sound correct with a guitar cab. Now, there are power amps for guitar. You can go get Mesa Boogie, I think, still makes the 25 and the 5050, which are, and I know Rivera made some at some point. Other companies have made them over the years. There was a time when, you remember this, when the refrigerators walked the earth, and they were filled with racks of wonderful stuff like ADA MP1s and all that happy stuff. That's when, to me, like, that's the heyday of the power amp. That's basically over at this point. Like, you have to go and seek one out now and, like, really do your research to find one. Otherwise, you're going to be using a Class D PA amp and hoping for the best. If you're gonna go PA, like, then that's where I'm like, all right, get your speaker emulator, because you're gonna need it.
Here's something I'm surprised more people aren't doing: to control volume on stage and yet still get that speaker sound. They used to make, and they still do, make these boxes. You put your speaker in the box.
ISO boxes, yeah, they still exist.
Yeah, the ISO box. That's what I meant.
They're still pretty popular. Rivera makes a line of things called the Silent Sister, which that's exactly what they are.
I mean, why aren't we seeing more of that?
Yeah, well, on the pro level, it's still out there, Jim, and people are.
I know it's out there.
Yeah,
right. I'm saying it hasn't really moved down.
Well, here's why: they're not silent.
Yeah, they're not silent.
And for these guys, they're like, well, if I'm going to do that, it's got to be silent. I'll just buy a speaker emulator instead. So a device like the Torpedo, I think it's a Torpedo One Note or whatever. Those kind of devices, or a Palmer speaker simulator, and those kinds of things, they're cheap as hell compared to buying an ISO cab. I mean, I know you can get some of the Palmer DIs for like $300. Torpedo is, that's a little bit more expensive. But that being said, for a quality ISO cab, I mean, you're pushing $700, $800.
I know that Wampler right now is working on trying to get his, I don't know if it'll be integrated into current Ampina boxes, Ampina pedal, however you want to say it, or if he's moving to a new one. But he's trying to get integration for that IR.
Yeah, and so there's already some products out there. Thomas Blue's got the Blue Box. Yep. There was another company called Nux that has one. I don't know enough about Nux. I think they're from China. They have a box that's like an IR loader. I
I'm
think
looking forward to trying the blue next year at Sweetwater.
I want to say Joyo has a IR emulator now too, or Mooer or something like that. So I mean, they're out there. They're going to become more common. If you're going to
think that's the next step for the Katana?
What, IRs?
IR?
Oh, I think so. If Katana V2 ever comes to fruition, it already has an IR in there for the cab out, because it's. Yep. I mean, it sounds freaking great, and there's no way that's just an EQ thing that's doing that. I would not be surprised to see them add support for like IRs, or if they don't load IRs into it. I know right now it's still based on the GT100 technology, which is like, I would say old school digital modeling, but it's really not. I mean, the GT100 isn't that old generationally. I could see them definitely doing that. I honestly don't know if they want to, though, because the Katana is supposed to fool people, right? When you play that thing, it's got 5 voices on it because it's supposed to be like an old school amp, right? It's got 5 modes, and that's what they want. And I don't think they necessarily want to play up the fact that it's a digital piece of gear. So they may never do that. I don't know. If they do, it'll be like a selectable line out.
I mean, right now what we have is like, you'll hear these currently, and I'm not talking about the Katana. We'd be talking about the Marshall Code or the Mustangs, or the other
right.
There are stuff like that where they say, "Oh yeah, you can choose a 4x10." You can do, but we all know that that's just all they're doing is tweaking the EQ, right? They're just changing.
And a lot of those older ones, yeah. Some of the newer ones are not like that. I mean, like the GT series probably had some sort of primitive IR driving that.
But we know that IRs are software, so
yeah, it's just a WAV file, basically.
Right. But it's the use of the WAV file,
right?
The circuit use of the WAV file that's going to be different, and that's what I mean. That'll drive prices. But I can see a Katana. What did they call it? A Wazacraft Katana coming.
Well, they have the Katana artist already.
I know they have. They have the artist one,
which has tweakable. It has tweakable.
Can you load?
And you can't load things in it, but it has tweakable cabinets, which means it's probably using IR technology.
Yeah, which means that we've got to be close to being able to throw an IR in there.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if they want that in their feature set, because it's not meant for direct out. It's meant to have speakers. Like that's even their head has a 5-inch speaker in there.
I can tell you right now. The guy I was talking about a couple weeks ago, we were doing sound for him yesterday. Yesterday was Sunday, yeah. Yesterday. And he loaded up. He was using a Katana, and he was using that DI out to our board, and he didn't mic the cab. He just ran DI to the board. The cab was for himself. Sounded great.
Yeah. So here's why I don't think the Katana is ever going to get like that deep a feature set. It's because if you really are buying it to go direct, Jim, you're just going to buy a GT1000. Or you're going to buy their floor modeler, because it has all the controls on it. Why the hell would you want to buy an amplifier if you could do all of it out of the floor modeler? Honestly, you're doing it really old school to actually have an amp behind you. Because if you really want to go direct, Jim, why are you doing that?
Me?
It's not, I'm just saying it's not necessary.
Right. I don't lug the cabinet with me anymore.
No, that's what I'm saying. You just take the head. Why wouldn't you just buy a modeler instead?
Right.
And then you go direct, and then it's all your pedal board and everything's combined in one unit. Like that's the way they're looking at it.
So for you, well, then again, I can look at it as the person that is like, okay, I'm monitoring it one way, but I'm throwing the other into another.
Sure.
Now, and that's the reason he does that. So, with your objectives, you're using a Helix.
Yeah.
But you also have
I run everything through my Mark V. I don't fuck around. Like, I'll be honest with you, I don't fuck around. It's all Mark V. The Mark V is more important than the Helix to my tone, like for a lot of reasons. And that's partially because I actually use the preamps in it. My Helix, the only time I'm really using the amp modeling is when I'm going direct to my computer. I mean, yes, of course I could go direct if I was playing out, but I don't play a lot of gigs right now. I would prefer to have the Mark V, the 1x12 behind me with the Helix out front so that I can at least control what's going on. And then the Helix is only just going to be a switcher and basically a couple of effects that I need for various songs.
Right.
But I mean, honestly, the Helix is total overkill for me. Let's put it that way. There's some reasons why I don't want to go the HX effects. We can talk about those if you want. But yeah, so that's why I'm sticking with it. The other thing is, so we were talking about this discussion of why the Katana is good with pedals,
Right.
and that's because it has that dynamic front end. I really believe that because they put so much effort into making sure that it had a dynamic front end, so it would feel right when you're playing without anything. That it made it easier to deal with like overdrive pedals and things like that. I mean, I use fuzz faces through it, and the way I use them is I put the crunch channel on and I drive it a little bit so it gets a little bit, nasty, and then I put the fuzz face out in front and it sounds great. It sounds like a Marshall Plexi.
Yep.
Like that's why I'm just jaw dropped at the fact that you could do that with a $350 amp now.
So, all right, we've gone over a lot of different things as far as the solid state and the tube technology
Right.
taking place. Here's the thing that I get. I just can't seem to feel the reflex of the distortion or an overdrive through its solid state the way I get when I push a tube in.
Because you have no compression. You're not feeling that. It's not distortion you're feeling, it's compression.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. The only way you're going to get that feel back, and I've had varying levels of success over the years running it through solid state amps doing this, is to put a compressor post.
Right.
And then hope for the best. And actually, it's been reasonable to do that. I found that it helps smooth out your dynamics, because that's the problem. So when you play through a solid state amp, everything is uneven, right? Your louds are super loud, and your quiets are super quiet, right?
Yep.
So if you use compression, you're going to bring those louds and softers together, and that's one way to get around it. And so a lot of your and I suspect that a lot of your solid state solutions and people that are designing these things are designing a lot of compression into them in order to make solid state amps more palatable to guitar players.
Yeah.
So
I think that's where I lose what I want from a solid state amp. But that said, if I'm playing mostly clean, I prefer a solid state amp.
But you're not having those problems with a digital amp, though, right, Jim?
Yeah.
Are they the same? So you are having those same problems with the digital amp?
No.
Okay. So they're different. And I think that again, it's the same thing. It's designed so that it simulates a bit of output compression.
Yep.
And that's basically what it boils down to. If you want, I mean, you can experiment with using a compressor and effects loop. So like that Champion 100, if you put a compressor in the effects loop, and that depends, because if it's designed right, you shouldn't have those problems. Another notable hybrid amp we missed. Actually, I want to bring this up before we transition to the topic. A notable hybrid amp that people dismiss a lot. It's Music Man amps.
Yes.
They were hybrid, and country players love those things.
They're still relatively popular in that genre, so to speak.
Right. So just if you haven't played one, they are hybrid. They have, and I believe their hybrid is set up differently. I think their tube is in the power amp stage somewhere. Because I remember hearing like, oh yeah, it's just for like compression and that kind of thing. But the snap, because they want it for the chicken picking. It's the snappiness and stuff to it. So, yeah, if you ever see one in the store, check one out, because they are pretty cool, and they're not junk. Like, they're really well built, can be serviced and stuff.
Yep.
Anyway, so what the other part of this discussion was about the differences between overdrive and distortion and fuzz, right?
Yes.
So I'll let you start on this one. You can give your 2 cents first, and then
what's that for overdrive versus fuzz?
Yeah, overdrive. Well, no, overdrive. So overdrive, distortion, fuzz, and are they Are they three distinct things, or are they not?
Yes. Well, okay. Yes and no. They're supposed to be. Overdrive means that I'm trying to push my amp into an overdriven place. That I'm trying to get the distortion of the amp by pushing it harder.
Sure.
Distortion, I'm distorting my signal before I get to the amp. And the amp is amplifying a distorted signal.
Right.
Okay. Fuzz is where I have a dog take a shit on my signal. And then
and try to cut a hole in your speaker and deposit the shit inside.
But fuzz, okay, so the difference, I think, the way I see, and I know that there's a sound difference to me. I'm going to talk about the sound difference. You talk about the electrical difference between distortion and fuzz. To me, distortion is that crackling breakup, where fuzz is literally that hissy, not fizzy. I don't want to get
fizzy. It's broadband.
Right. Broadband, complete distortion. Not that it's always a bad thing. I joke about the dog taking a shit on my signal a little bit.
Well, but, I mean, I don't think you would deny me playing a fuzz pedal. Like, I think you've heard me enough to know that I know what I'm doing with it. You know,
right? I would not have been able to dial in those Hendrix tones that you're getting. Forgot it. It would not happen.
Yeah. So
it would just sound like poop.
All right. So from the player's perspective, before I start talking about the electrical differences as I know them to be, from the player's perspective, I would say fuzz is one of those things where you really have to work to learn to play it because it's so different than playing with distortion or overdrive. And you really have to learn to vary your pick attack, your volume, play with your tone controls while you're playing. I mean, it is full scale guitar playing. You're using every part of that electric guitar you can to get the tones out, and it's like a fight. And I know it sounds like I think that's an overgeneralization. You've heard people like who's the guy from the White Stripes, Jack White.
Oh, Jack White. Yep.
He says I like to fight my guitars. He don't know what the fuck he's talking about, okay? Because he does. I mean, I get what he's saying. He's talking about fighting guitars, but you fight your effects more than you fight guitars when you're playing with a fuzz pedal. Like that's. I mean, honestly, I could take the best sounding guitar in the world and put it through a fuzz pedal and make it sound like shit. I mean, it doesn't take much effort. You just have to know what you're doing for it to sound good. So that's why I'm basically saying, like, that's the one effect where I think it's a skill set all to itself that really should be seen kind of separately to guitar. I know I always joke that I'm playing fuzz pedals. Like, I don't play guitar, I play fuzz.
Right.
Like, so it's a tandem thing. But as far as distortion and overdrive are concerned, I would say distortion is more like a fully saturated amp, right? I think think that's more prismatic in the approach, that there could be like overdrivey distortions and distortion-y overdrives. Like, there's definitely, so like the OCD is a good example because it kind of bridges the gap. It starts out as an overdrive, a very like dynamic overdrive, and then ends up in this almost like all out Plexion 10 distortion side, right? And all of these devices are designed to do what? They're designed to distort.
Yes.
One in a more pleasing way, one in a less pleasing way, and one in a way that does not give a fuck whether you're pleased or not, okay?
Absolutely.
And I think we can tell which of those three is that is. But in general, I mean, as a player, I can use all three. And you can use an overdrive and do a distortion to get a fuzz if you don't have one.
Yep.
Or you can buy just a shitty distortion pedal, and that'll usually get you into a fuzz territory.
I can tell you right now, to me, the Boss DS1 gets you into fuzz territory fast.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, my definition of fuzz is skewed. See, that's because your definition of fuzz is not skewed to the side that I'm at, where it's like, I'll play shit that you just let the guitar sit on the floor and let it go. Like, you know what I mean? So yes, a DS1 definitely sounds like a fuzz to somebody who doesn't play fuzz regularly. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but yes.
Well, no, I think it sounds fuzzy. I didn't say it sounded like a fuzz.
Sure. No, and I agree with that completely because it's got that fizzy top end.
Right, and that's what I was talking about, because real good fuzz doesn't necessarily, you can get it, but it doesn't necessarily have to have that fizzy top end,
Well,
where you only have to turn the gain up much at all on the DS1, and you can get that fizzy top end. Some people like that fizzy top end. There is something to be said. When you want to cut, I'll tell you what, you will be heard.
let's talk about usability. Let's talk about usability, right?
Yes.
So, no, actually, if you got the fizzy top end, you ain't going to be heard because it's going to disappear in the mix. That's like the kind of stuff that you get out of a fuzz pedal in that top end category is what makes a fuzz just disappear. It's got to be a very specific type of that noise. But what I was going to say was that, so like usability wise, your overdrive pedals are essentially you can use them as a boost. Actually, there's really 4 categories here. There's clean boost, overdrive, distortion, and then fuzz. And your overdrive and clean boost probably have the most overlap because you have dirty boosts and stuff like that. But basically, that's going to be, you want to have an amp that's kind of cooking a little bit. It's going to be a little bit warm, and especially a tube amp, or you're going to be using it to simulate the drive sound of an amp in a solid state scenario. But we're going to talk about tubes for the sake of this argument because it's the easiest way to discuss this. When you get into distortion, you really want it going into a cleaner amp. It doesn't have to be clean, but cleaner amp, because you want that clarity to come out. And so the reason why fuzz, I think a lot of people don't understand how fuzz works is because they see, well, if the overdrive is supposed to go into a dirtier amp and the distortion is supposed to go into a cleaner amp, then obviously a fuzz is supposed to go into the cleanest amp, right? No way. Jim, I can't stress to you how
There is a certain
loud
amount of logic that people bring to that.
when I'm doing those fuzz face demos, I can't tell you how loud it is. I mean, honestly, you're going to see the video I posted to you tonight so you could review it before I post it. The camera's shaking. Okay? The camera is shaking, and it's like bad. It looks like there's an earthquake in the room. And it's because there's so much bass and stuff coming out, but it's because my amp's turned up to basically saturation. And then I've got, a fuzz. I have 4 fuzz faces out front. What would you do if you had 4 fuzz faces out front? Don't answer. Don't answer. Just gonna leave it at that. Everybody would do it. And I'll tell you what, the bypass signal is so damn loud that whether I'm playing the guitar or not, it's fucking deafening.
Oh, yeah.
It was unbelievable. It was wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it in every video I can do.
It's a beautiful feeling, isn't it?
So, doing that, when you have the amp cranked up that loud, what it does is it takes all those highs off. It rounds it off. So you're just getting upper mids left. And the speaker also breaks up too, which is a big component of that. So that's why I said, like, yes, obviously there are different types of fuzz, right? So your early fuzzes are like crappy sounding and they sound like the guitar's broken. And then you go all the way up to like where I think with the modern fuzzes are like more like a muff. And a muff to me is on the distortion end of fuzz. Like very much on the distortion end of fuzz. And so for me, like, yeah, you can use that through a cleaner amp. And actually I prefer to use muffs through a clean amp. One with almost no saturation. A little bit of compression, but no saturation. And the reasoning for that is that it provides a lot of characteristics of like a cranked up tube amp. It's a big fat cranked up tube amp in a lot of ways. You just need to add the compression, and all of a sudden you sound like Pink Floyd. That's where I'm at with that. Now, as far as distortion stuff goes, like I have a lot of distortion pedals too. I mean, this right here, I'm holding in my hand the Pinnacle Deluxe from Wampler. This is not an overdrive pedal. Right. This is a distortion pedal. Okay, for me, like everybody says, oh, it's a amp in a box, so it's obviously a drive, right? No, this thing saturates the shit out of your signal, and that's the thing. Like, there's a big. I don't think you can make clear delineations in each of these pedal types. I think it's more of a spectrum. And you can find fuzzy drives too. I mean, there's and I think I recommended it to you. John Cusack's Screamer.
Yes.
V2, I think is the current one. The Cusack Screamer.
Yep.
I had one. It was gifted to me, and honestly, like I used that fuzz for a while, It was really, really cool. But it also had like tube screamer basically, and
Right.
It was a tube screamer that was clipping the chip inside so that it would be a fuzz. And that's cool. Like I get it, op amp fuzz, like that's a thing. So as far as we would preface this discussion with, I would talk about the electrical side of what goes on. And actually, I don't think it's necessarily the electrical side. I think it's more about the waveform and square wave versus sine wave. And fuzzes are basically square waves, and basically everything else is some degree of moving between sine wave to square wave, or even no wave. No, there's no such thing as no wave. But so I don't know. I've always been the extremist, and like for me, when I first started playing guitar, I was like, man, how distorted can I get? I was the guy in the store like shooting up metal zones with other stuff. Like that's pretty ridiculous. Like can I make it worse? Because I had it in my head that I was going to be this metal player, right? And I went in the complete opposite direction, which is even funnier. But so looking at where I come from, it's natural I would end up with fuzz, right? The extreme end of the thing. And then I was going somewhere with this. So being the extremist and going towards fuzz brings me to this place where I can look back at other pedals and see a clear delineation between fuzz and distortion. But I think that's because that's what I'm most familiar with. Do I think any effect is superior? No, obviously they're all different things for different jobs. They're all tools.
Call them tools.
Yeah, I think did we do an episode called Tools of All Kinds? But that's basically what we're talking about. It's like different tools for the same job. I don't know.
Listen, if you look back at one of the most famous distorted guitar sounds, right? Beatles, right?
Yeah.
Revolution.
Yeah, and that's Overdrive the Board, right?
Yeah. That's
Spirit in the Sky.
You would probably call that a horrendous sound.
Spirit in the Sky, same thing.
Spirit in the Sky. Another brick in the wall. The solo to Another Brick in the Wall. Les Paul do it, what do you call it? And straight into the board.
Yeah. Well, and I think it would probably shock people what actually does get recorded straight into the board even now. And not use plugins on the back end to make it sound. It's like a lot of the funk guitar parts you hear in modern music are straight into the board. Straight to the board. Yeah, and who the guy that does all those parts, and his name escapes me right now.
Oh, the one that did the song with the guys with the helmets.
Yeah, Daft Punk.
Yeah, Daft Punk. He was in Chic, or was he in? Was it Chic?
Oh, he's done everything, and he's played on every fucking session ever. But that guy, like, it's so funny because everyone's like, "Oh, you're always doing these chords, and you're chucking away at him." And he's like, "Hey, chords are diads." He's like, "I'm only using two notes." He's like, all these people be picking
Niles Rodgers,
Nile Rodgers, right? He's like, people be. I heard an interview with him. He's like, you go into the studio, and he's like, some cat's like, "Oh man, I really dig your record. I like when you did this." And he's strumming the whole chord. He's like, "Man," he's like, "I just hit two notes. Like, what the hell are you doing?" But he's the guy that went direct a lot. Like almost everything he's ever done is just push me to the board. I don't need
a strat straight to the board.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't discount anything. Like, obviously your style is your style, and do whatever you have to do to get the sound that's in your head. That's where I'm at.
Right. I think that's where people make a mistake, is that they say, "Oh, you know what? I can't do that. That'll never give me the sound I want. I couldn't possibly use a Stratocaster because I could never play metal."
Dude,
that's exactly
Yngwie fucking Malmsteen.
Yeah, I was going to say that's exactly what Iron Maiden said. No, because obviously Iron Maiden, Stratocaster.
Yeah, well, they used a lot of guitars over the years, but yeah, now it's Stratocasters with humbuckers, basically. So I don't want to discourage anybody in our group, and say that I'm not going to provide an answer to these questions. But I think we kind of got to at this point. It's like at some point you've got to explore this stuff for yourself. And you might find that snappy, you might be playing rock music, but you might find that snappy attack from a solid state amp completely changes your ability to play the instrument. In which case, go for it. Nobody's going to tell you no. And if they do, fuck them. Like, don't ever, and Nita Strauss said this, but I'm going to say it again. Don't ever let anyone hold you back from what you want to do.
Right.
Don't listen to them.
Right. Because the minute you start listening to the naysayers, you've already let them win. They've won.
Well, it's not about winning or it's not about winning or losing. It's about the fact that they don't know what's going to work. No one does.
Right.
I mean, look at all the guys emulating Nile Rodgers. Do you think they thought that playing dyads was what he was doing?
Right.
Like, so it's a whole thing. Like,
I actually always thought that he was playing 3 or 4 strings. You know, his lighter strings, but still 3 or 4 strings. Now I'm finding out he was playing dyads. That son of a bitch.
Yeah, it's a lot of his dyads, but it's not necessarily dyads on the same string. So there's some raking going on and stuff like that. But yeah. I'm reaching that part of my playing now too, where I'm in the same boat where it's like I can adapt and do something different, or I can pursue what I want to do, and that's kind of why I've got back into this Hendrix thing, because I'm like, you know, I can get those sounds. It's just money. Like, it's just a matter of putting the money out to make it happen. And I'm there. Like, literally bought like 3 pedals and I'm there. But I think it just has to do with finding your way and finding what you want and what you need.
What your tone is. Yeah. Just
understand that there are different approaches to using this equipment too, and they're designed from a different standpoint. That's kind of what we tried to do here, which is to show that, look, if you use a solid state amp, you're gonna approach distortion, overdrive, fuzz differently. I don't know that I would use a lot of fuzz through a solid state amp, but that's me.
So what did you not buy this week?
What did I not buy? Well, I picked up the Germanium Fuzz Face Mini for the podcast. It's actually sitting in the box. I took it out, used it for the demo, and then put it back in the box. Yep. I bought the Voodoo Lab Pedal Power Plus. That again is for the podcast. That's going to be used for the episode or for the, and you'll see it in the video demos that are coming out. And then it went back in the box.
And these are things getting returned. Yep.
No, they're not. They're not getting returned. I'm keeping because they're going to be used for the show. But I'm not using them personally. Like, they're going in the box and putting up until I have to use them for a demo or something.
Oh, okay. Until your year is up.
Right, and then I can do what I want. I can sell them or whatever I'm going to do with them. I will probably keep them because the things I'm buying are reference stuff. So, but basically, I mean, this week, what am I buying that I'm not buying? I'm still looking at the Amp One, still looking at Deluxe Reverbs. Yep. I'm still looking at Rivera Rock Crusher. I mean, I have a laundry list. So Sweetwater, I have a list for Gearfest next year that I've been working on, that it's just like things I want to make sure I get a chance to look at. Yeah. And I'm planning on putting together a significant amount of money before I go, like 10 top PRS money, and coming back with a lot of things that I can demo for the podcast, but also things that could work their way into my regular playing as well. So I mean, at this point, the sky's the limit. I'm looking at stuff, but I'm not running out and buying. The only actually, this is probably the thing I should talk about. So I don't know if you've seen this one, Jim. I'm going to walk away from the microphone for just a second.
Okay. I did not buy a Telecaster, so because I did return it, by the way.
So this is
I did try it out. This
is my white Stratocaster, right?
Yep.
Maybe I'll put some pictures in the show notes. Maybe I won't. Don't get mad at me if I don't. And it's aged. So this is a 2003, and you can see that the pickguard is like a totally different color than white. And it's aged nicely. The pickguard actually matches the white. This was Olympic white, Jim. It's now cream colored.
Yeah, I love the way that Olympic white ages.
So I like the use. I can see what frets you play and where you play them the most. Yeah, I got a chance to play my white whale this week.
Yeah, the scallop.
Yes, the Yngwie Malmsteen Strat. Okay. So the cool part about the white whale guitar is that for like 14 years or something, I've wanted to play one, and I've never seen one anywhere. And there have been a couple of times where I could have driven like an hour and gone and played one, right? But a buddy of mine who's also in the group, Dan Kish, he called me. Well, he didn't call me. He sent me a Facebook message the day after or on his birthday, and he said, I was at the one nearest you in Sam Ash, and they had one in stock. And I was like, oh shit, it's probably not there anymore. So I looked online, and they had it the next day. So I went back. I was there when the doors opened, and really excited to play the guitar. Thought it was going to be great. I wasn't going to buy it, but I knew that, like, because I have this thing, right, and I'm gonna work on this thing. So now I'm in a hard place where I played the Yngwie Strat. I liked the pickups. I didn't like the neck. So the scallops were okay-ish. I'd have to adjust. I don't know if I can go in and out of scallops. It's going to be something I'm probably going to do.
Like the way Vi does, or...
Yeah, so, like, how do you go from playing flat frets to scallops every 10 minutes? Like, it's a whole other animal. I think I am going to do it, but I'm going to buy a neck. But I can't buy a neck for a year. So...
No, you could buy a neck because you're not using it.
Well,
you're not going to use it. All you're going to do is take the neck and get it scalloped.
Technically,
right? It's going to take time.
Oh, no, I'm not going to get it scalloped. So the neck that's on this guitar, I refretted it years ago. I'm going to have Kish look at it. He does guitar work. We're going to see if we can maybe get the frets leveled and see if we can make it playable again. I'm not going to scallop the original neck. If I'm going to scallop, I'll buy one from Warmoth. I'll get one pre-scalloped.
You're looking at a scallop neck.
But right now,
you're not looking at a scallop neck from Warmoth.
No, that's what I would do. I would buy a scallop neck from them.
Oh, that's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah. So the neck that's on this guitar right now is not playable. Like it's borderline playable. Which is why this would be a replacement part.
I would try the nickel frets.
Oh no, I'm going stainless.
Or stainless, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would go stainless.
That's what I meant. Stainless steel.
Yeah, because everything's nickel.
Steel, and then you don't have to get a refret ever.
Yep, that's what I'm thinking. And it would be scalloped, probably bird's eye maple, both sides, and then be done with it. But I have to decide what I'm doing. It's like a $300 investment. And this guitar, so it's a Jimmy Vaughn Strat, so it was like $550 new. They go for $800 now. It's got some age on it. It's got some dings. It definitely shows the fact that it was a stage guitar for me for a really long time. So I kind of want to keep it going. And I just need to get like the right set of pickups in there, and that could be a Gearfest thing. But the neck I would probably have to replace and get it straightened out.
Obviously, for Gearfest, I'm still thinking the Amp 1. And at the very least, the IR from Blue.
Blue guitar.
Yep. And the other thing is the Gia. I'm still kind of jonesing for a Gia.
The Jiva?
Jiva. Why do I keep calling it Gia? I don't know.
Isn't that
Gia?
Isn't Gia like Gia was a fashion model, but Gia is also a thing from Final Fantasy, isn't it? Gaia.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's where I'm getting it from. Final Fantasy 14. Which I'm not playing any right now. Saving that money towards Gearfest, by the way. And I'm thinking, about obviously I'm not looking at pedals. I'm not going to look at pedals. It'll be that's the guitar I'm looking at. That's the amp I'm looking at, and the effect, quote unquote effect, is the amp or the Blue IR. That's it.
So I wanted to.
Oh, but I did. What did I get? So it is not tone related, not guitar related. But I did order something.
What'd you buy?
The Mark II from it's a MIDI controller.
Okay, all right.
25 key MIDI controller from
Novation. Kai. Yeah.
Kai, yeah. I think it's called a Mark II.
Okay.
And I'll be getting that Wednesday, so I'll give that a try.
Cool.
Because with all the software that came with the Focusrite, which I got, the Focusrite 2i2, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna pick up and start doing some stuff so that my guitar demos will sound a little more interesting.
Cool. Another thing, I wanted to share this with our listeners. I meant to bring this up earlier in the episode, like right after housekeeping, but since we're talking about this stuff now, for those of you that don't have a lot of money and you save up to buy gear, like I'm doing right now, I'm actually using a thing called Stash, which is an app for your phone. And what this does It allows you to invest in mutual funds and stock market stuff.
Really?
And so what I do is I take my deposits out of my account so I can't touch them, and I put them into stash, and then I invest the money. So I made $30 the other day off of I forget which company, but I made $30 on stock the other day, and there's like no trading costs or anything to this app, or if they are, they're minimal. And I use it all day long. And the cool thing about it is it's not for day traders. Don't think you're going to come in here and like double your money or anything like that. It's just a place to stick my money, but I can actually use it to generate some interest and then use that to buy gear too, or do whatever I'm going to do with it. So if you guys are interested, I can talk about this in the Facebook group and kind of turn you guys onto it. I'm
interested.
Yeah, it's a great way to put money aside for things like GearFest if you're planning a year in advance. If I keep the contributions I'm going in there, I will have several $1,000s in there when I get there. But I have a feeling life is going to get in the way of that at some point. But nevertheless, I'm sticking as much money in there as I can, and I'm planning on financing all the crap I buy at GearFest with it. So if you have anybody who's bought a Les Paul, if you're not making tons of money and you bought a Les Paul or something crazy like that, you've either done it on a credit card or you've done it out of pocket and saved for a really long time. And this just makes it easier to save because at least you're making money on your stuff, the money you put away. So this is a cool strategy to look at. Some people flip their way into gear. That's basically the same thing, except they're taking more risk on because they're buying the gear themselves, and then they have to do all the shipping and all that craziness to get stuff out the door. So it's a viable alternative. I think I'm making more money using stash than I did flipping too.
I would think. So yeah, it's the Akai Professional MPK Mini 2. It's MPK. I was thinking Mark because of MK, but yeah, MPK Mini 2. So I've got that coming. So I'll be putting up a demo together for that. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, they are. So I got a MIDI controller sitting around here somewhere. Mine's like 20 years old though.
Yeah,
because they don't die and they're just USB. So
now I may fall off the wagon to get myself a Boss Katana soon, but we'll see.
You're not going to fall off the wagon. You're off the wagon, Jim.
I fell off it a long time ago.
You didn't get back on. You don't have to get back on.
I got this thing.
I'm martyring myself for the good of the podcast. One of us has to be able to do this. So,
well, I don't necessarily have to fall off the wagon. Just kind of like
trail along behind it.
Fall on the road and then bounce back on. Every now and again.
Jim,
you gotta have it. You gotta have a habit.
What the hell am I gonna do with you? Try to get a streak going. Just at least do something.
Like 10 days. I didn't buy
10 days.
10 guitar.
Days. Now let's make it real clear. Jim lasted 22 days with Year of No Gear.
Okay, so how long did I last? 22 days before I bought the guitar. When did I get the guitar? How long ago? 2 weeks?
Yeah, so you're like at 14 days now.
Yeah, 14, 15 days. So I'm doing pretty good.
No, you bought a freaking MIDI controller.
That is not gear. That's not gear.
Okay.
It's only for the podcast.
I know my podcast. See, the only reason I bought my podcast is because I thought the contest was over. I was like, now if I buy this stuff, nobody can bitch. I bought it. Now my wife came in and the first thing she goes, "What did you buy?" And I said, "I bought stuff for the podcast." And she goes, "Yeah, whatever." And I thought she was gonna go in the group and be like, "No, David lost." No, I didn't lose. I haven't played that shit since I bought it. I played it in the demo and then put it back in the box.
There you go.
Which is really crappy because I feel like I'm not giving these pedals a fair shake because I don't know how to use them well. It's like I haven't played around with the knobs well enough to know what to do.
Yeah.
But whatever.
I mean, if I do get a katana, I'll just like the SG. I'll be completely honest. Say, got a katana. What do you think?
Just go buy your katana and shut up.
Well, I'm thinking about getting because they've got a katana with the foot controller. It's not saving any money, but I could get the two together.
Do you really need them both?
I was gonna say, do you really need the foot controller?
Well, I got the 100 head, and it's got. I'll talk to you after the podcast. We're at an hour 19. It's time to call it a day.
Let's do this.
So
I've been Jim.
And I've been David, and we have rambled endlessly for an hour and 20 minutes, which makes us the Practical Guitarists.
Impractically.
Yep.